Number 10 is Gateway by Frederick Pohl, which follows a miner called Robin, whose full name is Robinette, which he's quite self-conscious about, who's undergoing therapy with a robotic therapist on Earth. He is quite wealthy, living in a domed city in an overcrowded Earth, and he's recounting his experience on Gateway, which is a hollowed out asteroid which humanity discovered, which was abandoned long ago by a mysterious race of aliens known as the Heechee, who have seemingly disappeared without a trace. They've only left behind a few artifacts here and there and a couple of clues to the nature of their civilization. He is undergoing this therapy because of a traumatic event or series of events that happened while he was on Gateway. So essentially he was working as a miner with quite a horrible life, and he entered into a lottery which he won, and that allowed him to get a one-way ticket to go to Gateway. Now Gateway, as I mentioned, is this hollowed out asteroid with this interior living space which is quite sizable, and inset into the exterior of this asteroid are around about 1,000 ships, which range in size from one person to 3 people up to 5 people. And basically humanity are studying the Heechee, they're studying Gateway, and they're studying these ships. And if you go into one of these ships and you fire it up, it transports you at a faster than light speed to a seemingly random location in the universe. So this could be kind of orbiting a star or a planet or a moon, or you could just be out in the middle of nowhere. The catch is that humans haven't quite figured out how to operate these ships and control their destinations or their flight paths or anything like that, and a lot of the ships don't return from these voyages, and even if they do, they're in pretty bad condition. The ship could be completely mangled. It could come back a long time in the future where the crew have essentially starved or gone crazy, or they're injured from some kind of event that's happened while they're on this voyage. And so Robin goes to Gateway with the intention to embark on one of these missions, because if you do come back, you can sell any information, or more importantly, Heechee artifacts that you find, in order to receive an extremely large payment, which can basically set you up for life. So the story kind of flip-flops between the modern time where Robin is undergoing these therapy sessions and he's trying to basically outsmart the robotic therapist, and then the flashbacks to his experience on Gateway and the build-up to his voyage on one of these ships. Robin is quite a flawed character. He's had quite a hard life, and he's I know some people don't necessarily get on that well with him, but I'm not someone who needs the character in these stories to be extremely likable at times. And the central mystery here of the Heechee and the nature of their civilization, and the random, almost Russian roulette style nature of these missions on these ships, just pulled me through the story. The kind of interstitial chapters where he's undergoing therapy is also quite a nice break from the story. In between, you kind of get these bulletins of news and events that are filtering through while he is on Gateway, which gives you a sense of what kind of some of the other people are getting up to, how some of the other missions have progressed, etc. So there's quite a lot going on, and I think the world building is really quite good. Like I say, I think I'm someone who appreciates the mystery in some of these stories and doesn't necessarily need it to be fully resolved. So this is a book which might frustrate some people, but for me, I found it really, really compelling. There are a couple of sequels which I haven't read. They're not as critically acclaimed as Gateway is, but I do think I will get to them at some point, because they do directly continue the story of Gateway. This is one that I don't see a lot of people talking about, and even when I do, I see some mixed things. I think it's great, it's why it's on this list, but go and read it for yourself if you haven't, and if you have, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Number 9 is Flowers for Algernon, which follows a man named Charlie, who has an extremely low IQ, somewhere in the 60s, and he's working at a bakery, performing menial jobs, and he's quite satisfied with his life, I would say, but he's approached by a team of scientists who have selected him for an experimental procedure which is set to triple his IQ within quite a short space of time. They have performed this procedure on a mouse, which is called Algonon, and Charlie happily agrees to undergo this procedure, thinking that his life will significantly improve from his IQ essentially tripling. It's written in a really experimental way where it's told from Charlie's perspective, and because he's got such a low IQ at the beginning of the book, it's written with a lot of spelling and grammar mistakes while still being comprehensible. You can still understand what Charlie is saying, and as he slowly develops his intelligence, the writing becomes better and clearer, more cohesive. Those mistakes slowly filter out until you do get to a point where the writing is extremely good, which is just a really great idea, and it's really satisfying to see that transition in Charlie's writing ability, which I think is just a great achievement and unlike anything I've ever read before. It's a really emotional book, which I don't think a lot of science fiction tends to go for, and I think it's probably the most emotional book on this top 10 list. It sort of asks the question about whether intelligence is a burden and whether it does in fact make people happier to be smarter, and the way that Charlie's mindset shifts and how he starts seeing the world completely differently and acknowledging how he is being treated by other people and how oblivious he was to that is really quite heartbreaking at times. So I think Flowers for Algernon is a really great read. Charlie's a really memorable character. His character growth is just amazing to witness in this story, and so I think Flowers for Algernon is one of the best books that I've ever read, not just one of the best science fiction books I've ever read. So definitely give this one a go if you're more interested in characters and character development than aliens and spaceships and all that sort of stuff. Number 8 is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, which is the most recently published book on this list. It came out originally in 2015, and in this world humanity have terraformed a number of exoplanets, and they're undertaking an experiment on one of them where they're effectively going to deploy a group of apes onto one of these planets alongside a nanovirus which is set to infect them with the intention of rapidly accelerating their evolution. And then they're going to come back after a number of years to see how these apes have developed and evolved, and then they will effectively be treated as gods by these apes. Although pretty early on something goes wrong with this experiment and the nanovirus is deployed onto the planet without the apes, which means that it infects an entirely different species, which I'm going to say here because it happens really early on and it's the main point of the book. But if you don't want this to be spoiled because it is really interesting, then feel free to skip ahead. Now that that warning's out of the way, the nanovirus infects spiders, more specifically jumping spiders, and the ship which deployed the nanovirus ends up being destroyed. But then you have another colony ship of humans travelling to this exoplanet a number of generations later. And the story jumps between the spiders and the human colony ship on the way to this planet. And it takes place over a number of decades, where you get to see how these spiders evolve and how they develop things like culture, community, religion, how they interact with war, and you get this really interesting, really alien feeling perspective from these spiders in those chapters. And then you also get humanity on this colony ship, who are kind of coming in and out of hypersleep, where, you know, decades have passed and things are happening on the ship, things are going wrong, and these two entities are on this collision course that is just driving you forward through the story. It's quite long, I think it's 500 or 600 pages, but I just absolutely raced through it because it's really, really compelling. Tchaikovsky writes these spiders in such a wonderful way, where you get this sense that he really knows his stuff about arachnids and insects as well, and ecology in general, which is just so fascinating. And when the two, kind of the spiders and the humans, kind of eventually do collide, it's just really satisfying. So I think Tchaikovsky has done an incredible job with Children of Time. It's written in quite a straightforward way at times, but there are flourishes of more poetic prose in here, and I think that more simplistic style helps to facilitate the more complicated ideas that Tchaikovsky is trying to get across, particularly from the perspective of the spiders. So I love this one. And like I say, it's the most recent book on this list. I think a lot of more recently published science fiction is not really hitting the spot for me. It's not really doing it for me. But this one really does. So definitely read this one if you haven't. And if you have, let me know what you think about it. Number 7 is Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke, which is one of the first science fiction novels that I ever read. And I absolutely fell in love with it. It's a big part of why I love science fiction today as much as I do. Humanity have detected an enormous cylindrical object passing through our inhabited space. And there's only a very short window that we'll have where we can reach it and investigate it before it's gone forever. So they deploy the closest ship in its proximity to go and investigate it. When this ship gets there, they go inside this enormous cylindrical object and they discover a very strange, abandoned ecosystem almost that is surrounding the exterior of this cylinder. There's this weather system that kicks into gear, and there's all these strange contraptions and devices, and there's just such a really great adventure story feel to this one. And I mentioned earlier about Gateway that I'm not someone that necessarily needs these great mysteries to be resolved in these stories, and I think Rendezvous with Rama again might be one that frustrates people in a way, because it presents you with all of these mysteries and questions and it doesn't necessarily answer all of them. But I quite like that. It leaves you pondering and thinking about some of the discoveries that this crew make within Rama. Again, there are a number of sequels to this which I haven't dived into. I'm a little bit scared that it will spoil the experience in some way that Rendezvous with Rama gave me. But if you haven't read it, it's a very short one. It's got a very nice, quick pacing, and I find it to be a great read even today. Number 6 is Dune by Frank Herbert, and I'm not going to go too much into the detail of the plot of Dune because I feel like everyone knows at this point. But it follows a boy by the name of Paul Atreides, who's the son of a duke of the House Atreides, who are appointed by the Emperor to take up residence on the desert planet Arrakis. and extract and refine this spice, melange, which is this substance created by these giant subterranean worms, which has hallucinogenic properties and is used for all sorts of things, but primarily it facilitates space travel and navigation, because in this world, computers and thinking machines, as they're referred to, have all been destroyed in this jihad in the past. This incites a war between House Atreides and House Harkonnen, who were the previous occupants of Arrakis, and that effectively thrusts Paul into the desert, who takes up residence with the natives, who are called the Fremen. The most compelling thing about Dune by far is the world building. Frank Herbert does such an incredible job at building this world and the politics of it and the ecology of it and the way that the Fremen have developed their society on this desert planet, their relationship with water, their relationship with the sandworms is really fascinating. But I think probably the most compelling part of Dune and the Dune universe are the Bene Gesserit, this sect of women who pull the strings of human society and sow the seeds of prophecy so that they can use this for their own gain and manipulation. And they are really, to me, the most fascinating part of Dune and the Dune universe at large. But there's so much you can get out of this. I've only actually read Dune and Dune Messiah, so I do need to go beyond and read the next few books in the series. But to me, Dune is an absolute masterclass of world building, which is something I value really, really highly in these science fiction books. You'll hear me talking about world building quite a lot, which is why Dune ranks on this top 10 list. We're into the top 5 with Downward to the Earth by Robert Silverberg, which follows a man named Gunderson who's returning to a planet called Belzegor that humanity used to have colonial control over. The planet is inhabited by a sentient species of green alien elephants known as the Nildoror, and a lesser species which look more like giant hairy baboons with elongated snouts known as the Solidoror. And he used to live on this planet and kind of facilitate humanity's control over it with a quite significant role. And he's compelled to return to Belzegor to go and witness a mysterious ceremony that the Nildoror undertake within the misty northern hemisphere of the planet, which they call their rebirth ceremony, which is shrouded in mystery, and as far as we know, no human has ever witnessed it before. So he's compelled to go and see this, but because humanity have relinquished control back to the natives, he needs to get permission to go into the northern Mistlands from an elder Nildoror who has undergone this rebirth ceremony a number of times. He goes to see this elder Nildoror and he is granted permission to go into the northern Mistlands on the condition that he brings back another human who is in hiding within the Mistlands, who has kind of committed some kind of sin against the Nildoror, which they won't reveal, and they want to bring this man in for cleansing or some kind of punishment. So Gunderson has to travel deep into the Mistlands alongside a group of young Nildoror who are on their way to this rebirth ceremony, which makes the plot feel a little bit like Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, or something like Apocalypse Now, which is obviously inspired by Heart of Darkness. And on the way, he's conversing with these Nildoror, he's getting to know a little bit more about their spirituality and their community, because when he inhabited Belzegor in the past, they exploited the Nildoror for their own gain. They used them for heavy labour and other such things. So he is kind of grappling with his own past, and some guilt about the way that he treated the Nildoror when he was on the planet, and also the things he witnessed other humans doing, which violated their spirituality. And I think what Downward to the Earth does incredibly well is explores the lingering impacts of colonialism on a culture and a community and a spirituality and a religion so incredibly well, and it's something you can see reflected in our own society today. To me, Downward to the Earth is a really effective showcase for what science fiction can achieve as a genre. I think it's really incredible, but it's also quite strange. Number 4 is Neuromancer by William Gibson, which follows a retired hacker by the name of Case, who is struggling with substance abuse issues, spending his days sitting in dingy bars being served cocktails by bartenders with robotic arms, and skulking around the streets of Tokyo in the rain under neon lit signs. It's considered to be kind of the grandfather of the cyberpunk genre, and luckily I had experienced a number of cyberpunk films and games and books before reading Neuromancer, which gave me a little bit of a set vocabulary. I can understand some of the things that William Gibson is talking about in Neuromancer, which I think a lot of people can't at first. A lot of people really struggle with Neuromancer, both through the convoluted plot, but also the vocabulary and the terms that Gibson throws at you. He doesn't hold your hand, and you're just kind of expected to work out what he's talking about as the book progresses, which a lot of people really don't like. But for me, I didn't find it to be as difficult a task. So Case is snapped up by a mysterious benefactor, and he is offered one last job, which he's quite reluctant to take at first, but then this benefactor implants these toxin sacs within Case's body, which are slowly dissolving and will kill him when they do. And it's said that if he completes this final mission, then the medical facilities are available to remove these toxin sacs and allow him to go on living. So he doesn't really have much choice in the matter. And he embarks on this mission alongside this motley crew of criminals and hackers and cyber specialists as they kind of globetrot around this world which has become very technologically advanced. Humans have cybernetic implants, and it's all very well realised. And the best thing about Neuromancer is how it is described. William Gibson is potentially the best prose stylist that I've ever read in the genre. Even if you don't really get on with the more convoluted plot or terminology elements of Neuromancer, I think you would at least get something out of the really incredible writing that William Gibson puts forward here. Number 3 is A Fire Upon the Deep by Werner Vinge, which takes place in this universe known as the Zones of Thought, where the further you go away from the galactic centre, the stranger and the more complicated the civilizations and the technologies become, and the life forms within these civilizations. And it's said that in the outer reaches of the galaxy, which is known as the Beyond, these entities are developed, evolved, which are known as powers, which are these incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent entities, which are described almost more like gods than anything else. And they're often quite malevolent. and want to wipe out the civilizations within the galactic center, within the inner zones. The one thing that protects them is that the further, or the closer you get into the galactic center, the technologies that that exist in the beyond don't work as you get closer towards the center. You can't travel in the same way. Certain laws of physics don't operate in the same way, and so Vinji describes this almost as like the ocean, and within the galactic center, it's like the depths of the ocean, and the surface dwellers can't necessarily reach the bottom of the ocean with the technologies that they've got available to them. He also describes these powers in the beyond in a really incredible way. I think he says something like the tiger that paces beyond the bars or something like that, which is incredibly scary. And you do get the sense that these unknown entities that are out there are so incomprehensible and so far away from humanity that it just leaves your mind absolutely racing at the possibilities. And he doesn't necessarily show you all of that stuff, but you get this amazing sense that it is there. The story opens with humanity poking around in the ruins of an abandoned planet, and they accidentally awaken one of these powers, which goes on this tirade of genocide, wiping out other sentient species across the galaxy. And some of the human survivors from this planet end up kind of landing on this other planet, which is inhabited by a species of sentient dog aliens which have pack sentience. So the three or four individual dogs make up one mind, which communicate psychically and become one entity. And you also, there's so many characters and locations in this book. It's quite a big, long book, and so much is going on that I'll attempt to describe it, but I'm not sure I'll do a brilliant job of it. So you also have these humans who are in another part of the galaxy with other races of aliens, and they're on a mission to reach these humans on this planet of these dog aliens, because they think that they have the key to stopping this power, which is on this galactic kind of extermination mission. So you have the power that's kind of somewhere in the background that's completely destroying everything. You have the humans that are on the planet of the dog aliens, which are known as the Tynes. And then you have this group of humans and aliens who are on their way to this planet to try and get the means to stop this power. It takes place across a number of locations and planets in the galaxy. There are dozens of characters. It's so complicated and huge in scope and scale, and somehow Vinji pulls it off perfectly. I've talked a lot already about world building, and what Vinji does here is he builds a galaxy, he builds a universe, and you get a really tangible sense of the way that all of this interacts, and he still leaves room for speculation and mystery as well. This is one of the best books that I've ever read. It's a stunning achievement of science fiction, and if you haven't read it, you absolutely have to. In second place, and I really do go back and forward between the second and first place books on this list, but for now, in second place is Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, the only author to appear multiple times on this top 10 list. And another one I read when I was a bit younger, which was really influential and shaped and moulded my science fiction reading journey and my tastes as well. Earth is visited by a number of alien ships which take position in the sky above major capital cities around the world. And the aliens on board these ships communicate with Earth through certain representatives without directly revealing themselves physically. And they say that they are taking over control of Earth to prevent the extinction of humanity because of the path that we are on. And they do this by setting forth a number of rules and conditions for how human society should take shape. So they demand that we remove borders and a number of other things which result in this utopian society. These aliens become known as the Overlords, and they're quite clear that they want this takeover to be peaceful. And when some nations reject the Overlords, the Overlords kind of flex their power by turning off the electricity grid and things like that to demonstrate that they can do it forcefully if they need to, but they don't want to. They want this to be a peaceful conversion from human society on its current path to this utopia that they then create. They say that after 50 years, they will reveal themselves physically to humans once they've got used to the presence of the Overlords and their society has been shaped more in their image. So what you're really building up to through a large part of the book is, well, what are these Overlords? What do they look like? What are their intentions? And so you kind of get that reveal, and it's extremely satisfying. And I recommend that you don't look up Childhood's End at all. You just go out and buy the book if you haven't read it, and get to it without looking anything up, because if you have that spoiled, I think that would be a real shame. But even if you did have that spoiled, there are a number of other reveals and directions that this book goes in that are just sensational. It really has this incredible scope and scale, which opened my mind to what science fiction could do and what it could be. So Childhood's End is something which is probably going to be cemented within my top 3 forever. It's that good. Arthur C. Clarke is a master. I've read a number of his books and I want to keep reading more because he's just so great at what he does. So Childhood's End is firmly in the number 2 spot at the moment. And number 1 on my top 10 science fiction books I've ever read is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It follows a group of pilgrims on a pilgrimage to the planet Hyperion to visit this entity known as the Shrike, which is this spiky metallic being that can seemingly materialize anywhere on the planet and commit really brutal murders. It inhabits a location known as the Time Tombs, which are a series of ruins that are moving backwards through time. And these pilgrims can't just fly directly to the Time Tombs because ships tend to malfunction when they're flying over the area. So they need to land in the capital city of Keats, named after the poet John Keats, who wrote the poem Hyperion, and then go on this epic journey across the planet to the Time Tombs. It's seemingly the last ever pilgrimage that's going to happen for reasons that I won't get into. And the book is structured in the same way that Chaucer's Canterbury Tales is. So these pilgrims are all from different backgrounds, and they are telling each other their stories on the way to the Shrike. And their stories all in some way connect with the planet Hyperion, or the Time Tombs, or the Shrike specifically. And they're all kind of their own genre, these stories. Each one of these stories feels completely different. There's one that is almost a horror. There's one that's a neo-noir detective story. There's one that's a romance. There's one that is a military action sequence. And Dan Simmons does all of these perfectly. He kind of flexes his writing ability in a number of ways, in a number of genres, in just one book, which is one of the reasons this is number 1 for me, because it's just such an entertaining reading experience and a satisfying reading experience. In between each one of these pilgrims telling their stories to the others, they are progressing their journey across the planet. So you're getting a bit of the actual world building itself on the planet, as well as these stories that are kind of flashbacks. And then there's a bit of a subplot going on as well, where one of the pilgrims among the group is potentially a traitor, so they're trying to figure that out in the background as well. It's doing so much, and it's doing it all incredibly well. It is just, the scope and the scale is amazing, the world building is great, the writing is incredible. The structure of the book just keeps you ticking along the whole time. It fills your mind with these questions and these mysteries. Again, similar theme, not all of them are resolved. Some people take a real issue with the ending of the book. It doesn't bother me at all. It does set up a direct sequel or a number of sequels, which again I haven't read, so I do need to keep going, particularly because I like this one as much as I do. But you get this sense that Dan Simmons is an incredibly intelligent mind. He's weaving in these references to art and poetry and history, philosophy. It's just such a dense work that you can pick apart and find new things in every time you read it. So for me, this stands at the moment. Like I say, Childhood's End sometimes flits into this number one spot, but for now I can't get Hyperion out of my mind, and that's a real measure of a quality science fiction book to me. Does it get under your skin and stay there? Does it stay within your mind after an extended period of time? And Hyperion is the best example of that to me. So thank you very much for watching. I wanted to put this at the end just to say that I'm still relatively early in the grand scheme of things in terms of my science fiction reading journey. I've read probably over 100 science fiction books at this time, and I've got a long way to go. There are, massively influential science fiction works that I haven't read, and authors that I haven't read any of either. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, wow, this book is not on this list, it would walk into this list, please let me know in the comments. If you disagree with any of my choices, let me know in the comments as well, and we can have a bit of a discussion about that. And please do subscribe, because I'm going to be making an updated version of this list as I read more and more within this genre. So thank you again very much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.